keep it as raw as possible, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's good. It's
How,
fun.
how are you?
I'm good. It's a Friday morning here. I know it's a Thursday night for you.
Yeah, did you know it's so funny? I've actually just spent the past 20 minutes flapping about whether I stay in my dressing gown or not. And
I was in my pajamas and I was like, nah, I should get out of these.
well, it was like, I thought, no, you definitely should, you definitely should. And then I thought, oh no, both of us are a bit about all that self-care stuff. I was like, it's fine. Did you sleep well? Morning.
I did. I did. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's a good way to start off a Friday. It's been a busy week. First week back at work, first week back coaching clients. So, yeah, a nice end to the week.
How's it been for you?
Yeah, good. I've been loving, I'm one of those people that's like, I don't think you'll ever have like the perfect work-life balance. So I just have work-life integration. So
Oh,
making sure I still do the things that I enjoy and not worrying about whether it's the perfect balance.
yeah, that's a really nice way to have it. I'm definitely swayed towards more like a burnout vibe than like, just because I get so excited about everything that I'm like, yeah, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, and then it's like, oh, okay, now I'm like a little bit dead.
Yeah, that was definitely me last year.
Really.
Yeah, but I've pulled it back a little bit.
um, what's the weather like where you are? Baking, right?
It was really warm yesterday. It's a bit overcast today, and I thought it would be very sunny, but it probably will clear up a little bit later. It's about like 27, 28.
I am very, very jealous.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, thanks for coming on my channel. This is very exciting. I know we've like spoke about it last year about having you on. Um, Obviously you are queen of periods, really, queen of.
I am. So what do you do for work? I talk about periods.
Yeah, good. For people that don't know you, could you just give a little introduction to yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Sarah King. You will see me online pretty much on every single platform as Sarah Liz King. So Elizabeth is my middle name and I just shortened it down. And I am an exercise physiologist by trade and also a health coach. So what I do in like the short version is I help women find a healthy balance with food, exercise, and their body image. And I do this through coaching and my online group programs. I specialize specifically in those recovering from eating disorders, disordered eating, and hypothalamic amenorrhea. So it's something that I've had my own lived experience with as well. And then as a professional, I made sure I was fully healed before I started specializing and working in this area. So I'm very passionate about it because I know how much better I felt once I went through my own recovery, and I just wanted others to know that that feeling and that, you know, you can have that life of freedom that you think is just for everyone else, but it can be for you as well.
Definitely. Would you mind like giving us a bit of a background of your HA?
Yes. So I had a lived experience of an eating disorder for several years, and it started when I was probably like 18 or 19, and I actually lost my period at my first year in university. So I remember studying for exams. I was very, very stressed, and probably a couple of weeks before I was meant to go into all of my exams, I was like, oh, that's so strange. Like, I don't have my period. And I went and saw a doctor, and he was like, everything looks fine. Don't we love that line? Everything looks fine. And I was like, well, obviously it's not fine. So I didn't really stress about it. I didn't really say anything. At that time, I had also started going to the gym because I'd asked my parents, they're like, what do you want as your graduation present? And I was like, well, you know, I really like exercise. I had previously done competitive horse riding and I had sold my horse. So I was like, I should do something active. So I started going to the gym and started eating healthier, and I didn't really tie any of the things together. Fast forward about a year, and I took all of the things around healthy eating and exercise to an extreme level. And at that time, I was also studying nutrition and dietetics. It was not a good combination. So I was applying everything about what foods were bad to myself from what we learned at university, not knowing. I was like, well, I don't really have any of those chronic diseases that they're talking about. And so once I fell into my eating disorder, my hypothalamic amenorrhea stayed around because obviously my body was in a state where it felt so unsafe. And recovering from disordered eating or eating an eating disorder, while it might be like a short period of time or you feel like you fall into those patterns, it can be quite an exponentially longer period of time to come out of it. So I went through my own journey, which took several years, and got to a point where doctors are like, oh, you've reached your recovered weight. I felt so much more relaxed around food. I wasn't really compulsive with the amount of exercise I did. And I was like, cool, I'm happy. Like everything's fine. But I still didn't have a period. And I was like, this is a bit odd. Then I went on the pill. I got misdiagnosed with PCOS. And I got to the point when I was like 27. And I was like, if I want children
Like
at
10 years.
any 10 years. Yeah, 10 years. So it's probably like 27, 28. And I was like, I need to figure this out. And I remember going to this talk and this other dietitian and personal trainer was telling her story. And I was like, I am her. I was like, I have whatever she has. And I'd never heard of it before. Before then, I'd always just assumed I had PCOS because that was the only diagnosis I had ever heard of. And then when she's like, this is hypothalamic amenorrhea, I was like, all right, well, I need to fix this. So got the No Period Now What book, actually got support and help from a professional. So I went and saw a psychologist, I saw a dietitian, because there wasn't really like one person that was doing everything. So I was like, okay, well, I need some kind of support. And to be fair, like the professionals I saw, the dietitian I saw, she was amazing. And the naturopath I saw, also amazing. The psychologist was like, I have no idea what this is. So wasn't as helpful. And it took me about, once I dived 2 feet into recovery, because I feel like a lot of people like tiptoe their way close towards it. And they're like, I'm kind of doing changes. Once I dived with 2 feet into recovery, it took me about 7 to 8 months to get my period back. So probably a little bit longer than others who were going through a similar process took. And I just became fascinated by the body and by hormones. And that's when I was like, once I feel fully healed, I want to help others in this situation. So yeah, it took me 10 years to get out of that. And look, I could sit here and go like, in hindsight, I wish I hadn't done X, Y, and Z. But I'm very grateful for my journey, for all that it's taught me, and now how I can help other people.
Definitely. And do you find that the 10-year gap is quite common in the clients that you work with as well, or does it range?
It's a really different range. I find that it's definitely, so those that definitely come and see me, it's definitely been a number of years. But I've had people that come to me for shorter periods of time where they've relapsed into disordered eating patterns and they're really just trying to get everything back on track. And that's kind of been their red flag. They're like, I lost my period last year. That's kind of how I knew things were really, really bad. I need to address this now before it kind of lingers for any longer. But yeah, I've had clients that haven't had a cycle for 15 years, 9 years, any amount of time. And the important thing I think that we forget about is it's not really the number of years that your body's been in this as to the amount of time it will take you to recover. Yes, it is a little bit easier if you haven't been in hypothalamic amenorrhea for as long, because it means that your low energy availability and also your behavioral patterns aren't as ingrained. But even for someone who's had it gone for 10 plus years, I mean, for me, 7 months in the scheme of things is a drop in the ocean.
Yeah. And how important is it that we recover from HA? I get, and I'm sure you must do, I get a lot of messages that say like, I haven't been diagnosed with HA exactly, but I have all the symptoms that you talk about, and it kind of like everything's kind of adding up. And then I get other questions that's like, why do I even need to quit exercising, or like I don't want to gain any more weight, and all of these sorts of questions that kind of, I think, the answer needs to be like, what can motivate people is to know like the real importance of us recovering. So yeah, I'll shut
Yeah.
up answer.
No, I think, you know, you are so passionate about it because you've been there yourself, right? And it's this experience where we're like, oh, it's just a period. It's no big deal. That's what we tell ourselves, right? It's no big deal. The truth is, your period is like your fifth vital sign if you are a person with a uterus. So, having that monthly bleed tells you that you are having a regular menstrual cycle with fluctuating hormones. And those hormones play a role not just in fertility, but in our health overall. So, in our bone health, estrogen is bone protective. So, without it, we can lose up to 2% of our bone mass every year. And your bone mass peaks at about 25. So if you go through some of your really crucial years of your life not having enough estrogen, you can reduce your bone mass, and that's irreversible. So then you run the risk of things like osteopenia, which is low bone mineral density, or osteoporosis. So your risk of fractures increases. Then we look at things like heart health. Estrogen is also protective of our hearts. And the really critical thing that most people don't recognize is hormones actually play a huge role in our mood and our mood stability. And so without it, you know, I typically see a lot of people suffer from really difficult and really intense anxiety. And we know, you know, even from studies of clients going through recovery of anorexia, if they're given like an exogenous estrogen patch, their levels of anxiety and depression reduce drastically compared to those who aren't giving that kind of medication. So we know that estrogen and progesterone have these incredible roles in our body far beyond our fertility. So if you're thinking, oh, it's no big deal, it actually is a big deal for you as a healthy human being, not just for being fertile.
And is there a time of the month? So you're saying about how estrogen can help with anxiety and stuff like that. Is there a time of the month that we're more likely to have anxious thoughts and be anxious?
Look, it's hard for me to speculate because anxiety is not just this thing that happens in a vortex or in a bubble, right? We are impacted by so many different things. Typically, it's usually in the second half of your cycle when your hormone levels are just generally higher. But in saying that, when you typically recover from HA, your hormones aren't perfectly kind of balanced immediately. So you might have like higher estrogen levels and not as high progesterone levels. And progesterone is actually like a calming hormone for most people, unless you have something like PMDD, and in which case your body acts a little bit differently. But if you have a nice balance of the two, your anxiety shouldn't hugely peak. For most people, it's when they're still in those like initial recovery of like 3 to 6 months of getting their first cycles that their body still feels a little bit foreign to them. Because remember, like, your body's still figuring out how to do this again, and you need to give it a little bit of time.
Yeah, definitely. I've even noticed it myself of that. I've noticed actually the past couple of cycles, I don't have any PMS apart from giant sore boobs.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't really have anything. It very much creeps up on me.
Yes.
But I have still noticed that I will have months where I'm like, okay, okay, I think I've got this. And the next day I'll be like sweating, or I'll break out, like randomly break out, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, no, we haven't quite got it sorted yet. And I guess
Yeah.
am I right in thinking like the advice for that would be along the lines of like, just be patient, like just trust and just wait for your body to trust you again?
Yeah. So I think one of the most common things, and one of the reasons why I started my group course, is because so many people get stuck in overthinking every symptom that they get. Like, oh my goodness, is something wrong with me? Oh my goodness, is this normal? Is this common? What should I do? And if you've really mastered the basics of that HA recovery protocol of eating enough, like modifying the exercise that you're doing, focusing on creating some stress reducing routines, there's a few other things, working on your body image, also an important one. Your body does need time, and it needs a space where you can air those kinds of worries with other people to let you know that everything is going to be okay. Like breaking out, I had terrible cystic acne when I was going through my recovery. And funnily enough, it wasn't like, it was a little bit on my face, but it was like all over my shoulders. And I was like, oh my God, I've never dealt with this before. And thankfully I have the most amazing GP, and she's like, you'll be okay. Like, this is common. Take a deep breath. You will get through this. And that's what a lot of women need, that deep breath, that hug of support, to know that like, you don't need to do anything drastic. There is no magic pill. This will sort itself out.
Definitely. Do you find this is like, because I'm guessing you coach people, like girls all around the world as well,
Yes.
right? Do you
Yes.
notice that there's a difference between GPs and like the healthcare services around the world and what they can? Because and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like where you are, it's a lot more cared for, and like women's kind of like hormones, it's all taken quite a lot more seriously, whereas in the UK it feels as if well, I was told just come back in 3 months, and I was told come back in 2 months, come back in 2 months for a year, and then I got told, like, then eventually I went in, burst into tears, and I was like, I just want to go see someone. I don't know who, but show me someone. And
Yeah.
I went to see a gynae, and she tried to diagnose me with PCOS. She took it to someone above, and he was like, no, she hasn't got that. And no one, then again, it was like, oh, we don't know what you've got. And that was it. And I had to go find other professionals. Do you find that it is different all around? Do you feel like it's different around the world?
I think hypothalamic amenorrhea in general is so often misdiagnosed with PCOS because GPs are taught a lot about PCOS. Like, oh, we have, a huge prevalence of type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. So this is the one that you should be looking out for.
Right, okay.
And then we have this terminology of lean PCOS that comes up, which in my books is kind of like very rare. Sometimes kind of not a thing, but can happen. You can have PCOS and HA, but that's a different story. In Australia, it is easier to get diagnosed because GPs are able to give you things like blood tests easily. And you can go to your GP, you get that bulk billed, and you can ask specifically for, I need blah, 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 to see if my hormones are doing something funky. And because HA is that diagnosis of exclusion, you kind of have to go in knowing what tests you need and pretty much dictate to your doctor, hey, I need you to look at X, Y, and Z, which is really backwards because for a lot of people who don't know what's going on with their body, they're like, well, I don't even know where to start, which is the most difficult thing. So sometimes people will come to me, we'll have a consult, and then I'll go, you need to go to your GP and you need to get these tests, and you need to make sure that your prolactin level's not too high. You might need an MRI or an ultrasound just to rule out anything else that might be going on that can cause a missed period, because that's really important too. And then if that's not the case, we kind of match up personal history, with what's going on with your blood work. And then we create this scene of a diagnosis of exclusion that gives us HA. In Australia, I don't find that process is too difficult to get people to go through. Sometimes they are sent to an endocrinologist, and endocrinologists are amazing if you get a good one. And I don't want to shun on any part of the medical world because they are so integral to what we need as women just to be healthy humans. But there's a big push for the pill or HRT before allowing ourselves to go through a recovery process. And I think if you are someone who is willing to make the changes, you can recover that period. And if you give yourself a bit of a timeline, if you want to get pregnant or you have to really focus on your bone health, give yourself a window of time where you're like, I'm going to dive 2 feet into this process, really give it my everything. And then if something doesn't happen within that time frame, and I say at least 6 months, if you're being really honest with everything that you've done, then go back and look at option B.
What would option B be? The pill and that sort of thing potentially, or?
Yeah. So for most women, to protect their bones, the pill isn't enough. So it would be something like HRT, which is a higher dosage of medication, and it's usually given as a patch. So an exogenous estrogen patch and some progesterone, because you actually need that higher level of hormones to prevent further breakdown of your bones. And seeing an endocrinologist can be helpful for that, because what they can test that GPs often don't test is your bone turnover markers. So how fast is your bone breaking down? And that is something important to note, because if those are really, really high, well, we can't let them go unchecked for too long. So that's one. And then the second one would be, if you wanted to get pregnant, looking at fertility treatments. Okay. And I think the really important thing to know is, like, if you go through the recovery process, and even if you don't get that natural period back, but maybe you've increased your BMI to that more fertile zone, your fertility treatments are more likely to be successful than if you had just gone to them straight away.
Right, okay. I always like to tell people, if I get messages of saying like, God, when can I start working out more? Or when can I do this? And I'm just like, look, just don't worry about that. What you're going through now isn't forever. Like,
yes.
Get it back, get feeling, because also as well, and I don't know if you found that, well, I'm sure a lot of your clients probably have felt the same, that actually by the time that you've got over that barrier, and by the time you've actually got your period back, you're actually in a state that's like, oh yeah, I don't want to work out like that anymore. Or like, I look back and I think, how did I have the time to do some of the workouts that I was doing all the time? So if we were to sum it up, how do people recover from HA?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're so right. Most people come out of this and they're like, oh my God, my life is so much better. I never thought I would be as happy as I am now, having made these changes, which felt so difficult to begin with.
Definitely, yeah.
But to answer your question about like, how do we go about getting our periods back? It's simple. And that's different because it's not easy. Simple, but it's not easy. So it's increasing your calorie intake. We generally say that the minimum is around 2,500 calories. Now, this might be different for you if you're someone that has a really active job, or for instance, you're an athlete and you have to maintain some form of light training because it's your job. Yep. Then we look at modifying your exercise. So giving up things that are really high intensity, high volume, high frequency, high duration. We're really taking things down to being quite chill, right? So we want our brain to kind of perceive any movement that we do as not being chased by a tiger, which is kind of like your CrossFit or your heavy weightlifting or going for a run or something like that, to just being something that's really good for your mental health. It breaks up your day and it gives you something that makes you feel good without overstressing your body. So an example of that might be some like Pilates mat workouts or some yoga, or you can modify your weight training. And I always encourage people, if you are going to modify your weight training, see a professional, get some guidance on that. Don't just like try and think that you know it all. There's actually science to it. So I go through that quite extensively with some of my clients, because I'm an ex-phys by trade. So that's where it all began. And then the third part is managing your stress. So physical and psychological stress. So the physical stress from exercise, we take that right down. And then we look at psychological stress and we look at managing that as well. So those are kind of the three keys for getting your period back. And then just really working on your relationship with food, your relationship with exercise, and really focusing on how you can be kinder and more compassionate to your body, I think will set you up for such a better and healthier, balanced life overall. But it is something that you have to really approach with that element of being patient and persistent.
And that's the hardest thing sometimes, isn't it? Especially like, I know that a lot of people come from like my background, which is type A, fast, loved hit, loved quick, loved being busy. And I still do. I definitely have, well, as mentioned earlier, about like a tendency to burn out, because I'm always like, let's go. And the idea of doing something slowly for a long amount of time to not see any results potentially for quite a while was daunting, but so worth it. And
Yeah.
I actually, like, similar to you, I look back and I definitely tiptoed in. I was eating more, I was eating a lot of nuts, I was reducing my workouts. But if you look at like the whole grand scheme of things, it was only until I dived straight into it, working with the professional, that I was then able to recover within like 3 months, I think it was, or 4 months. So it's definitely worth it. And I always, when I get messages, I always say, like, please work with a professional. So if people are going to work with you, what can they get out of it? Like, what's your background, if you like, that makes kind of it like eligible, if you know what I mean, of like, yeah, cool, let's go work with Sarah?
Yeah. So I guess the main way that people can work with me for recovering their period is I have a group program called Healing Hypothalamic Amenorrhea. I have done extensive extra training, like above and beyond me just being an exercise physiologist and getting my health coaching qualifications. So I guess what makes me different is the fact that I know that this has to be like a holistic approach. A lot of people worry, but like, you're not a dietitian. So everything that I do in my course is accredited by a dietitian. So that whole section, all the meal plans, all of that advice, you know, would be the same as if you were to go get like a very expensive nutrition consultation. You have it there. But yeah, the way that I kind of work is really looking at people's mindset and then teaching them about how their body works. So the science of like, what is actually going on with your hormones and how you're making these changes, when you're making these changes, what's actually going on inside of you, so that you can actually go like, okay, like I'm having a really crap day, but I know that what I'm actually working towards, like this is what it's doing for my body. So it's that blend of like science and compassion. And obviously having gone through it before, I think that makes me really get the whole process myself. And I've just loved working with so many women, because I think initially when you go and see a professional, you're so skeptical. You're like, I am a unicorn. This will not work for me, but tell me what I need to do anyway. And I see so much of that, especially when I start like a new group. They're like, I know this will probably work, but it might not work for me. And then when they see all of the changes fall into place and they're actually like, wake up one day and like, oh my God, there's a period. I'm like, see, that's what you know, that's where all the hard work goes. But yeah, I think I'm continuously always reading and upskilling myself. And I'm just so excited to be in a position to help so many women.
Yeah, definitely. I always say as well that when I worked with Rene McGregor, and I always say that Rene didn't ever tell me anything that I didn't already know, because I'm similar to you in that I read the No Period Now What book. I was diving deep into science studies. I came across science studies that I was like, I don't even know what, I was having to like skip straight to the conclusion, because I was like, I don't know what any of that means. And I knew everything that I needed to do, but actually having a professional tell me,
Yeah,
enabled me to be like, oh, okay, maybe this might work for me then, because they tell me to.
yeah. And I think that's the huge missing piece for so many people. It's not that you don't know what to do, it's that you need that support and accountability to actually do it. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Like, it's human nature to be nervous to make changes, and to have someone there that's going to be your cheerleader and give you that gentle nudge actually is what is the game changer for so many people.
100%, yeah. So I know you saw this morning, I did really love
Yes.
when on my post it's like, I'm talking to Sarah tonight, ask your questions, and you say,
And I was like, I'm talking to Chloe this morning.
I was like, so weird. So if it's all right with you,
Yes.
answer, I'll maybe just pick like three. Just
Go for it.
okay, I've lost it. Okay, here we go. So this one's about set point. So does
Yes.
set point range talk about weight or fat and muscle mass?
Okay, so a set point range refers to the weight that your body naturally likes to sit at. And one of the biggest fears that people have is that when they start eating more, is that weight gain will be exponential. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So everyone's body has this preferred ratio of muscle and fat that it likes to have. So when you start gaining weight, people think that it's only fat that you increase, which is not true at all. So your body is very intelligent. It knows that if you are increasing in size, that it needs more muscle to move that body around. So you have small incremental increases in how much muscle mass you have and how much fat that you have. What happens when you start working out a little bit less is that your body composition changes a little bit. And for women, we actually need a higher percentage of fat mass because those leptin stores in our body are actually what signals to our brain that there is enough energy and abundance around. So that's one of the keys that we actually need to focus on. So being at a really low body fat percentage for some women is not ideal. Now, that's not to say that you have to have it. You can still have a period on a lower body fat percentage, but it's not always ideal if you look at your hormone levels. And I think that's the most important thing to know is like the difference between just getting a period and having like your optimal hormone profile. So a healthy body fat percentage for women is anywhere between like 21 and 30%. So it does, like set point just refers to like your weight range. It doesn't really specifically talk about the exact muscle fat ratio. But what we do know is that genetically our bodies have this kind of set point in their head where they prefer a certain amount of muscle and fat mass as you start to increase weight. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess there's also that element of adapting, like your body does adapt to the amount of calories that you give it.
Yes.
So like we see that from people that are dieting, right? They eat under 1,000 calories and they're like, I'm not losing any more weight. Yeah, that I'm not losing any more. And that's just where their body adapts. And it's the same with
increasing
your calories. That my best friend, she does like bulking and cutting, but incredibly sustainably. She has like the best approach. I'm so jealous. I often look at her and I think, why didn't I just follow that approach when I first started? Why did I have to go down the hit hole?
Yeah.
And she's on like over 3,000 calories on a bulk and only just starting to gain weight, and that's just where her body just naturally adapts. And that's the same with what happens with HA. I do understand where the scare comes from, because I think it's important, like if you suffer from this, there's a lot of that like fear around fat and around weight gain that you often see people that are on like the TV, and you're like, well, they just kept eating and look at the size of them, and I don't want to do that, and I don't want to do that. So I think it is like, that's why having these sorts of conversations is really important. Be like, it won't happen, don't worry.
No.
Okay, so next question: what type of exercise can you still do in HA recovery, and how much a day? I feel like you covered that in the sense of like reducing. Maybe just touch on like the how much a day. Maybe could we touch on like the frequency of how much you're doing?
So if you're someone that's just like, I'm going to chill out and just do something like gentle walks, your body can tolerate between 30 and 60 minutes a day. But I'm talking about like a pace where you can have a conversation with your friend and you're not like huffing and puffing up and down hills. It's like super relaxed. If you're doing something that's more structured, so if you're doing even something like a structured yoga class, which might go for an hour, or a structured Pilates class, I usually say like no more than 3 sessions a week, and then just take the extra time to let your body rest. Because if anything, your body hasn't had rest for a really long time, and it's going to thank you so much in the long run for that. Because a lot of people ignore these like niggling aches and pains that have been going on, and they're actually like, my body was actually under a lot of stress. And giving your body that time to do some kind of movement but actually work on repair is going to set you up for when you go back to whatever exercise you enjoy long term. So try and keep that long term mindset. But if it's like just walking every day, it's fine. Don't feel guilty if you just have some days on the couch watching Netflix. That's totally cool if your only exercise is intervals to the fridge and back. Doesn't matter. Yep.
Yeah, I love that. There's two more, if that's okay.
Yep.
We have time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, for
I've,
sure.
I've been doing everything but not getting my third period back, and it's making me so anxious. Help.
So there's a few things here. Um, Irregular cycles in the first kind of 3 to 6 months are okay. If you have a longer period, what we typically look at is, okay, has there been more stress? Even though you say that you haven't changed anything, can we go through what you're eating and how you're sleeping and what your job is like? Because sometimes there is usually some factor to kind of look at. But the biggest thing is to just trust your body. Sometimes people skip a cycle or they have a really long one and then it comes again and they're like, oh, okay, my body's not broken. But the more that it's such a double-edged sword, because with HA, once you get your period, you're like, cool. And then you start stressing about like what happens next. So the stress of getting or not getting your period is stressful, and that then affects your recovery. So it's really about reminding yourself like, okay, talk it out. Let's walk through everything. If there's something that we need to address, let's address it. Otherwise, Zen mode. Let's just focus on keeping our body calm, keeping our body relaxed, trusting in ourselves, which is where really good mantras and positive affirmations can be so powerful, and see what happens in the next 20 days, 28 days. Yep.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate, so I got 3 cycles back and then missed 2. And
Yep.
I definitely I got a little bit cocky and I was like, yeah, I could do this, I could do this. And actually what I found is that the more you stress about it, the more stress you're adding to the body, which is what we're trying to get rid of. So
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, final question, if that's okay. Now,
Go.
this is an interesting one is, what unique cases do you have in your clients? So are these different unique symptoms or things that might have helped them? Is there anything like, I wonder if maybe this person might be looking like, we know to eat more, do less, keep stress, but is there any kind of like little things that maybe were unique? Yeah, unique cases maybe.
Unique cases. So my most unique case was actually I picked up on something that a doctor didn't, which is why it's so important to like work with a health professional who knows what they're talking about. Is there are other causes of a missing period, especially if it's been, more than 6 months. And someone came to see me, and this person did have a history of dieting and a bit of disordered eating and over exercise. So it was like, clinically, you're like, everything kind of matches up with hypothalamic amenorrhea. But I went and had her take some blood tests, and a few things didn't really add up. Her prolactin level was really high, but her GP didn't really say anything. And I was like, you need to get this checked. And it actually turned out that she had a tumor on her pituitary gland,
Wow.
which can obviously impact your ability to have a menstrual cycle. So look, I think that's why it's important to make sure that you are looking at all the factors. That I've only had that happen once. She's fine. She's been treated. And she now has a healthy menstrual cycle and had to go through making lifestyle changes. But we needed to pick up on that first. In terms of like other unique traits, I've often had a lot of people that have come to me with like failed IVF cycles, going like, oh, well, I've done some stuff to improve my nutrition and some stuff to change my training. And now I've gone through 3 failed IVF rounds, and this is my last straw, and then have been able to get pregnant naturally or have had a successful IVF round after that. So I think like I haven't had anything super crazy where I've gone like, that doesn't make sense. But I've definitely had a few really wonderful cases of people feeling very hopeless and then to them becoming very hopeful.
Honestly, I think if I had your job, I think I'd just end up spending the whole time crying. Every time I have a period, I'd just be like, "Oh, stop it! I'm gone." Every time someone gets pregnant, I'll be there, Auntie Chloe at the door.
I'm very excited to see. So there's a few people from the first round of my course that ended up falling pregnant. So I'm very excited to see the first round babies when they are born.
Oh, that's so fun. You're going to have like different generations of
Yeah. Yeah. It does make, so I'm single. It does make dating really awkward when people are like, what do you do for work? Help women get pregnant and get their periods back.
Yeah, well, my boyfriend, so weird story, I ended up seeing him on the beach and he was with a girl that I knew, so I found out who he was. Anyway, he followed me on Instagram and I was like, oh no, he doesn't know me, and he's just followed me straight away on Instagram, and I thought, oh god. So I just bit the bullet and I messaged and I said, you're either really into periods and spirituality, or the girl called Mia, who I asked who he was. I was like, oh, Mia wasn't very subtle, and he was like, oh, you caught me, tell me all about your period. Which is a great icebreaker. It's a great icebreaker, because then you don't have to have that awkward conversation of like, oh yeah, don't follow me on Instagram unless you're really into periods.
Yeah. I just think all of the men that follow me on Instagram, I'm like, I'm excited for your future wives and future like girlfriends, because you're going to be so clued up.
Oh yeah, Jim bought me my first moon cup. I swear he's more excited about it than but I've come on, he's like, yes, get in there. But I do think you're right in the sense of like, I think it's more actually, if anything, it's sometimes more important for guys to know, because there's such that misconception around periods of like, it's minging and girls are just moody and miserable, and actually if we are moody when we're on a period, we should own it, because we can't help it, it's our hormones.
Yeah, exactly. Having someone that's supportive and understands it, so much better.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for coming on. That has been great. I feel like there's a little like info nuggets there. I know you've mentioned earlier, but just remind everyone where they can find you.
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Sarah Liz King, and my website is the same, sarahlizking.com. And then I also have a podcast with loads of helpful resources, and that is called Holistic Health Radio. And you can find that on Spotify and iTunes as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. Have a wonderful day. I'm gonna get ready for bed now.
Yeah. Have a lovely sleep.
I'll see you later.
Bye.